welcome to PedgePod. I'm your host, John Bognot, with Pauline Wong and Eugene Kim. Hi, everyone.
Hey,
Hey.
How's your weekend?
good.
Good?
Was it
Busy?
weekend? Yeah, it was weekend.
Yeah. Well, it is
Losing
weekend.
losing sense of time.
It's a long weekend because of Memorial Week here in the U.S. So everybody's on vacation, spending time with family.
Hmm.
For today's episode, in beautiful Maui, we have a special guest. It's Caroline Tran. She is an internationally published wedding, portrait, and commercial photographer. She excels in both film and digital photography, and her work has been featured on the covers of books, magazines, and in various print publications. In addition to her photography career, she is actively involved in speaking, mentoring, and teaching, all while successfully managing her role as a mother to two young boys. In this episode, we will be discussing work life balance as a photographer. So let's go ahead and dive right into it and explore this topic.
All right, well, welcome back to the Page Pod. We have today the great Caroline Tran. Okay, yeah, we don't get this sort of opportunity to pick Caroline's brain too much, so I mean, on a like this sort of personal level, I mean, she gives a lot of talks everywhere.
Well,
so.
thanks for having me. Of course.
Caroline, obviously, you as a mom of two boys. How old are they?
They are currently 9 and 12.
9 and 12. I
Yeah.
guessed it right. I knew the older one was 12.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure the younger one was 8.
Yeah.
7.
But they didn't exist when I first started wedding photography, so they, were part of the journey.
Right, right. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember you saying somewhere like you used to bring when they were baby, like you used to bring them to WPPI.
It just occurred to me right now that I've been telling people wrong, because I've been telling people I've been going to WPPF for 12 years, but my son is 12 and I've been going before he was born.
Okay.
We don't count pandemic years, that's fine.
Yeah. But I went during the pandemic too. They'd actually never skipped a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, during the pandemic, Caroline became the creator of the year, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah. That's when I met Caroline as well. So for the very first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Caroline was saying like probably one of her babies were youngest participants in the WPPI.
They actually give him a name badge.
Aw, so cute.
So it's good that they don't have age restrictions. With all the other conferences, they do.
I heard
Really?
after they did.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Every rule was in place for a reason. Yeah.
Okay. So Caroline is the one who made that happen. Okay. Do you call yourself a wedding photographer like right now as well, or how do you
I
describe
say
yourself?
wedding and portraits because
Okay.
I still do like weddings regularly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's not like intense as I used to. It's like about 10 to 12 a year.
Okay.
So it's still a steady flow.
Mhm.
But if you look at like just income wise, like a heavy majority of it comes from portraits.
Okay.
I would say probably 50% from portraits, 25% from weddings, and 25% from education.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Nice. And then with the weddings, like when those like 10, 12 spots fill out, like you don't just take it anymore, or
Mhm.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it's like I try to max out at, ideally it would be one a month, but there are slow months.
Mm.
So some months have no weddings and then some months have 2 weddings.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me as I have a 6-year-old son, and and probably a lot of photographers have families. And how do you? I guess what's the work-life balance for you? Like in terms of
Yeah.
like how you define it compared to like how other people perceive it.
Yeah, I mean, when I coach other photographers in building their business, I always advocate most people, the way they do it is they build their business, they start marketing, they get gigs, and then they just start taking the gigs, and then whatever free time they have left is time that they have to live life, right? So what I hear often is like, I don't have enough time to work out.
Mm.
I don't have enough time to like attend family functions.
Mm.
I don't have time to read. I don't have time to meditate, right? It's like, or they'll or I get comments on my Instagram a lot like that, where they're like, oh, like I wish I had time for that. I'm like, time doesn't just come. You have to make time.
Yeah.
You know, like no one is out there making time for you, right? So I always encourage, like when I'm coaching photographers, to start with you first. Identify, you know, what your ideal life is and what you want to, how you want to live, how you want your schedule to be, and then and then plan work around your life, right? If a client wanted to meet with you, you would put it in your calendar.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's important to you.
Right.
If you want to work out, or if you want to attend your kids' school function, or if you want to volunteer at your kids' school, put it in your calendar if it's important to you, right? But oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this, I didn't do this in the beginning, right? Because I didn't think to do it. And it was like a wake-up call at one point. I'm like, I would schedule a client in my calendar. Why don't I schedule, you know, these things in my calendar, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't until my second was turning 1 that I started like prioritizing like my own health.
Yeah.
And, you know, these are my workout times. Like I'm not available for meetings.
I guess I'm sort of in the middle of that. I always say like, especially workout is something that I always say like, I don't have enough time for that. I think one of the reasons that I say that is because, and when I think, I don't know if this applies to a lot of the other photographers as well, but if I don't put in the work in terms of, because work is, you know, where you get the money out of, like, so if I don't put in that sort of time and effort into, you know, making the money side of things, then I don't have that freedom to do something else.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. So, like one of the chapters in Like Nobody's Business, my coaching program, I have like a spreadsheet where I have people like basically dream out what your dream life is. And then we price out what your dream life is to figure out like how much do you need to make? I'm like, it's sprinklers.
It's not going to come this way, is it?
It would be really entertaining though. Those are weatherproof. But yeah, price. So maybe it's being Asian, maybe it's coming from immigrant parents, but all my life I've been taught to chase more, right? Next, the next bigger thing. And I got to a point in my life where I'm like, when is enough? Like, when do I need to stop chasing and hustling? And when can I just be content with what I have, right? Like, my parents were always like, anything for school, anything for work. Like, you know, like, for example, like when my grandma passed away, they didn't even tell me about the funeral because they're like, you should be at school.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, actually, I really would have wanted to be at the funeral. But, you know, to them, like, nothing is more important because I get it. You know, they came with nothing. And so for them, like, that security is so important to them, right? That nothing can be in the way of that. And for them, providing for us was very difficult. So them not working meant we might not have dinner that night. Right. So it was a matter of survival. Whereas we're privileged enough now that if I skip work for, you know, one day, we'll be fine, right? And so it was hard for me to shift mindset in that way. And I also feel like it's just our societal culture too, that we're constantly being chased more, right? And then there's lifestyle creep as well, right? You make more, well, first of all, you dream of like, let's say that white picket fence and owning your own car. So you work hard so that you get it. You finally get it, but then now you've stretched your budget and now you're in debt for it. So then you have to work harder for it. Yeah. So then now you're hustling even harder for what? For a bigger house, for a newer car, right? And then it's just this never-ending chase. So one of the things that I start off when I'm coaching photographers is like, let's just scrap the outside pressure. Like, what do you want? You know, what kind of life do you want? Like, did you want that 2-story house or did your parents want that 2-story house, right? Like, did you want that fancy car or are your peers making you feel like you need that fancy car? So once I feel like once we quiet out all those noise and we could just be honest with ourselves on what we actually need, let's price that out. Once you price that out, then we can figure out a business plan to have that, you know, to sustain that kind of lifestyle. And at that point, it gives you a lot more liberty to just be like, I don't need to take that gig.
Yeah.
I don't need that extra wedding. I don't need to work this month, and be okay with it, right? And I'm not saying everyone goes, but that was my mindset roadblock in the beginning and why I wasn't able to have work-life balance before. It was all like this, self-imposed, yeah.
So how long into, your career did you make that mindset change? Or what is there, maybe a specific point that you're like, oh wow, like I should,
It was probably when I had my second.
okay.
Yeah, when my second came about, so they're 3 years apart. And when my second was turning 1, I think was a big like life change for me.
Yeah.
It was when I was realizing that, my older one's going to start school soon. When they were in preschool, it's no big deal pulling them out of school, right, to travel. Like my older one especially traveled a lot with me before he turned 2, and costs money to travel. But, he has no memories of it, but he's been to Thailand, Bali, Singapore, Japan, like he's been a lot of places. But when I started preparing for kindergarten, that's when reality hit me that if they are in school Monday to Friday and I'm working Saturdays, maybe Sunday, when do we see each other? We're going to be like ships passing in the night, right? And if I'm only shooting sunset shoots, means when he comes home from school, I am off on a shoot, and I come home and they're asleep. And that's not the life I wanted. So that's when I started pivoting. And this is why I think it's so important to start with what you want, because that's when I was like, all right, how can I make this business work for the life I want, rather than my life being at the mercy of my business? So I was like, okay, when do I ideally want to work? I ideally want to work between 9 to 3, because that's when my kids are at school, right? It's after drop off. I have enough time to at least like brush my hair, brush my teeth, and then start working, and then be done by 3, and then I can go pick them up from school. I was like, how can I make that happen? So what I did is I started leaning more heavily into the portraits. I was like, I can make portraits work during the week. So that was shift 1, right? Like, I'm going to start marketing a lot more babies rather than weddings, like posting less of the weddings and then just heavily pushing the babies. The next thing I did was, how do I now, before my portrait pricing was just my portrait pricing. But then I was like, actually, I only want to shoot between 9 and 3, Monday to Thursday. So then what I did was I kept my portrait pricing that same price if you shot with me Monday to Thursday during 9 to 3. And if it was outside of those hours, I charged double. And that was because coming from that mindset that I don't need to be shooting on the weekend. Like, and actually, even if you want to do weekends with me, it's wedding rates. Like, there's a wedding minimum, right? So it's fine if it's like in albums, if you want to buy multiple albums to meet that threshold. But it needs to be worth it for me because even if it's just an hour, I find that it just changes my mode for the day. Like, I can't truly relax and be with my kids knowing that I'm going to have to work in an hour, right? So 1 hour work really means like an hour prep, coming home, being exhausted. So it really is like, becomes like a 4-hour process. But I find that once you start to like valuing so I have a lot of clients who are like, well, can you do weekends? I'm like, I can, but it's going to cost this much. So do some clients not book me? Yeah. Some will not, because the schedule doesn't work. But a lot of them make it work because they want to work with me enough, right? So a lot of them will be like, all right, well, I'll take half day off. And then we'll do the session like early in the morning, for example.
Right.
And then with all your portrait works, that's all indoor.
Majority. So what I've also done since, the next phase is, if you come to my house between 9 to 3, Monday to Thursday, it's one price. And if I have to drive beyond 3 miles of my house, then because there's a park 3 miles away. So if you want outdoors, we could do it at the park near my house. But beyond that, it's double the price again. So it's like one of those where I'm not saying no. I'm just giving a price that makes it worth it to me. But I'm also giving an option and a more affordable option if they are willing to go through a little bit of inconvenience. Some it's not inconvenience, but if they're able to work with my schedule.
Well, that definitely makes sense. comes out to the opportunity cost and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so probably a lot of, so I don't know if you know, but Caroline is still a part-time photographer and a full-time something else.
What are you full time?
I work at the University of British Columbia. I'm a
Oh.
nutritionist, so I help with the chefs reviewing the allergens and so very, very different. It's just like the day
Cool.
job.
I could
Benefits are
go and talk to you about that.
So yeah, it's working for now.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see, another common thing I hear, I don't have time to eat healthy.
Mm.
Right? I'm sure you get
Everyone
hear that.
eats every day.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not an excuse. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. But you know,
Yeah.
you get that a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's like I don't have
Yeah.
time to eat healthy, so I just went for fast food or whatever. Yeah.
But I think a lot of the things like what you're saying, or I guess what I was trying to say was that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast is someone who is still sort of trying to make it in the photography industry, like in a
Yeah.
sense that trying to get more clients and
Mhm.
still,
So what you're trying to say is like through my evolution, like I'm like many steps ahead now, right? So
Yeah.
dial it back to
Yeah.
when I first. Okay, so I have. So same thing. I still start with the what do you want? What do you want your life to look like, right? And we start working towards that. So the first thing is knowing what kind of shoots to say yes to and what kind of shoots to say no to. So I think I love it's chapter 2 of like Nobody's Business, but we
Yeah.
basically identify your goals. Like we put it in writing, right? Like, and we take a quiz. It's a self-assessment, that really figures out what your strengths are, what you're good at, what you're not, what you need help with, and what you can really play up on. And then based on that, it's like, how can we really leverage your strengths to, take you where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
So anything that takes you to that path, right? Anything you do on that path takes you a step closer. Anything that you do off the path actually takes you away from it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when you haven't identified what that is, you don't know. So if you ever find yourself like, should I do this or not? Should I take this gig or not? Right? It's because you don't know where you're trying to head to, and
Right.
that's why you're feeling this way.
Yeah.
So when taking on a gig, I always encourage you to ask yourself, like, is this taking me closer to my goal or not? But also acknowledging that sometimes some gigs are just paycheck gigs.
Yeah.
So if you are in the process of trying to transition out of your full-time job, or if you want to keep your full-time job, some people don't want to do this full-time. Some
Right.
people just want to be a part-time photographer and are happy with that, right? So that's what what I struggle with a lot of the education that I'm hearing outside is that it seems to be giving photographers this idea that there's only one way to run a photography business,
Yeah.
right? That you have to go full time, that you have to do luxury, that you have to double your pricing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that might not fit their goal. Like somebody, for example, might be like, I love my full-time job. My personality needs stability. So that's what chapter 2 does. It really analyzes like what your values are. And if stability is really important to you, right? And maybe running a business, because the stress that comes with running your business doesn't actually fit your personality. Like, I really just enjoy shooting. I just want to be creative.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with marketing all the time, right? That might be your goal. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just acknowledging that for yourself, right? That's just what I want to do. It's like, awesome. Okay, then let's figure it out. When is your availability to shoot then? So you're going to work your full-time job 9 to 5. Maybe you can take one day off a month, and that becomes the one Friday that you are able to take on more shoots that are, wider range. Maybe you're willing to give up one Saturday a month, and then that becomes how you schedule your shoot in. So yeah, does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
I think when you talk to a lot, because you do a lot of mentorship and you do a lot of education side of things, it's amazing that you actually have a questionnaire for the finding the whys and the finding their what direction they want to go to. Do you feel like a lot of people don't really know what they want to do, like with their photography, and they're finding their whys?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like a lot of my coaching is like a therapy session. A lot of people enter my program, and there's the other baggage stuff comes. But the way that I see it is that's reality. And that's actually part of, like it would be really naive of me to just either hand you a business plan without understanding what you actually do, or for me to hand you a marketing plan without knowing what your goals are. Some of these baggage are real. I mean, all baggage is real, right? But some of them have real impact on how you would run your business. For example, if you have a sick parent, that is going to affect how you will run your business this year, or next year, for however many years, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, don't feel guilty about that. Let's work with that.
Yeah.
Maybe this year, your child is starting school. It's the first year. So the real examples in my life when I've had to do this is the year I gave birth, or each of the years I gave birth. My business had to scale differently, right? But the whole idea is once you have this system in place, so by the end of Like Nobody's Business, you have a system for your business now. You have the ability to dial it up, like scale it up or scale it down when needed. And I find that most people just think of scaling up, but not realizing that you actually can scale down too. There are times in your life where you might need to scale down, and that's okay. Like, it wasn't a bad year. It wasn't a failure year. It's life.
Yeah.
I think having been in business this long now, there's been probably like 3 cycles already.
And I think it's kind of making advantage of it as well, right? Like everyone thought pandemic was like a year that you don't really do anything, but Caroline went out, she scaled up.
I did. My pandemic year, I 3x'd my business during the pandemic. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So I think it all comes down to perspective and like what your goal is, I guess. Yeah. Any other leading question that you want to ask it?
No, but I was gonna say, like, I think for me, now that I have a full-time and part-time for photography, I think I'm saying no a lot more because I only have, this amount of time, right? So I think that's really helped me put into focus, like, okay, this is not what I want. Even without doing the whole questionnaire, I think, like, automatically it just happened, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I was teaching and doing photography full-time, and I was thinking of quitting teaching.
Yeah.
My naive thought was, imagine how much more free time I'll have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because right now I'm doing teaching for, like the first half of the day.
Yeah.
And then photography at night. But if I would get 8 hours of a day back in my life, like so much me time, so much like free time, but like a typical new business owner, like I ended up just working so much more.
So it was hard to decide to quit that teaching.
I had benchmarks for myself of when I knew it'd be right to quit. So my benchmark, because I'm a calculated risk taker. I admire those people who could just go cold turkey, but maybe it's my upbringing. That's just not, for me. However, I also am okay taking risk as long as I know what the worst case scenario is, and I'm okay with that. Like the cost of it, I calculated as like the cost of that lesson, right? Like the cost of education, the cost of that workshop.
Yeah.
So for me, I told myself, when photography can match my teaching salary, then I'll allow myself to quit. That was my criteria. And I achieved it in by like a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then at the end, so I did full-time, both jobs, like for 2 years. And then,
That's intense.
Yeah.
it was very intense. I didn't sleep much. Yeah. And then I told my mom, and I was like, photography's going really well, Mom. And she's like, great. Don't let it affect your real job.
So now, I guess when you work, because you've kind of experienced with your full-time job and well, 2 full-time jobs. And then did you anticipate when you started having family that you one day had to probably make decision on like almost like anticipate like what you have to do, like maybe in the future? Was that sort of like planned?
When I first gave birth to them, I think I was still pretty naive.
Okay.
I think I was still naive, thinking that I could do both.
Yeah.
With my first, at least, I thought I could still do all the destination weddings that I was doing, because I was traveling like at least once a month, and we were doing international, like, fairly often too. And I just took them along to everything.
Yeah.
And it was so sweet though. I remember one year, I had a job in Chicago, and my bride and groom from the previous year lived in Chicago. Like, their wedding was also in Chicago.
Okay.
And then I got hired back to Chicago, and the previous bride was like, "We want to babysit." I was like,
wow.
"Really?" I was like, "Okay." They had no baby experience.
Oh my
I
gosh.
know. So I'm like, "Here you go." I like dropped my firstborn child with them, and here's milk. Here's a bowl. Like, they had the cured diapers, and then we just
Wow.
yeah, I did the wedding, and
Crazy.
That one okay? So you weren't like anxious like during
Yeah.
during the wedding?
no, because honestly, at that time, what I was grappling with was I didn't want to lose what I had. Like, I was really trying to maintain the same business that I had pre-mommy and post-mommy, and I did not want to let go of any of my destination weddings. That was pre-pivot, right? And I was just trying to hang on so dearly to not changing. And so, I mean, yeah, bless those clients' hearts. They're so sweet. Like, I mean, they're the sweetest, but yeah, they struggled with the baby. I'm getting texts like, he won't drink milk. I'm like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, he doesn't take a bottle." Oh, they had to come to the wedding at one point.
Oh really?
Because my child doesn't take a bottle. I knew that. So during the reception, they came by, and then
I think to tell them.
I was just hoping for the best, I'm like, "Please take a bottle today." Yeah, and then
That
I just
was, probably the truest adventure baby.
Yeah.
popped them on a boob
Oh
in the
my
middle of
gosh.
speeches while my second shooter, who was my husband, was shooting, and then it's to hand the baby back and then go back to work. Yeah, I should send him a gift again. Yeah, but it wasn't the moment when I realized I really had to pivot. Was right before he turned 2. I took him to Maui, and the wedding was out in Uluwatu. And right when we landed, he just had a fever. It's like 104, 105, and it was like right before the wedding, and we ended up having to have the driver take us 3 hours into the main town, and like, healthcare there was like so sketchy. And I mean, he's fine, but it definitely was a wake-up call. That's like, is this sustainable? Like, I can't keep, like, just the anxiety and the risk, and like, so we kind of paused traveling for a little bit after that. I don't think we took another international trip for 3 years, because we did it again when my second was 1.
Okay.
Then we took him to Singapore and Tokyo after that. But prior to that, like, I was a little traumatized after that. Like, you're in a foreign country. He has 105 fever, like, I don't know, is it bacterial? Is it viral? Like, so then they just prescribed every antibiotic under the sun. Like, when we showed up to the clinic, the doctor looked like she was 12, which was like, I'm not going to judge. Like, I'm Asian too, right? But like, all the gear looked like toys. They look like she went through her her old grandpa's gear. I know, because my mom used to be a nurse, and I've seen my mom's old gear.
Oh, okay.
It's like mercury thermometer and like old school. Yeah. Anyway, but that was a wake up call where I was like, this is not sustainable. Like, I really need to pivot. And then that's when I started to rethink about my business. And it was hard emotionally. It was hard, because up until then I was known as a destination photographer. And every time family saw me, they just got used to never seeing me. Like, family just always knew that, oh, where's Caroline now?
Yeah.
Right. And so then I felt like a loser for a while when I decided to stop that. And family's like, oh, where are you going next? I'm like, nowhere. Like, and that's also a personal thing, right? It's a mindset thing. And so that's why I have my my coaching students create that goal for themselves, because when you have that goal for yourself and when you've actually identified what success looks like for you, you're not so affected by what others expect or think of you. So if success is, you know, being able to support my family and being able to pick up and drop off every day, like, are you achieving that? Yeah, you are achieving that, and be proud of that, you know. And if someone's asking, are you traveling? It's like, no, I have no plans to, and be okay with that, right? But oftentimes I find that we end up judging our own success based on other people's standards, right? Like, because you look around and you're like, oh, wow, look at all those cool destinations this person's going to.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, look at all these headshots. Oh, wow, that person's shooting all these celebrities. And you feel like you have to do every single thing, but you can't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you weren't trying to, if you weren't marketing to celebrities, then why do you feel unsuccessful? Right? Like, it's kind of like saying, like, oh my God, I'm such a failure, I couldn't run the marathon. Well, like, have you been training for it? No, like, right? But you wouldn't say that about yourself. You wouldn't say, I'm a failure because I didn't run a marathon, but if you weren't training, right? But why do we do that to ourselves in business?
Yeah.
Oh.
So were you mainly just doing weddings first, and then how did you decide, like, okay, portraits might be the next best? Like,
So when I first started photography, my coworkers' kids were who I had access to. So I actually already practiced a lot of kids photography, but I considered myself a wedding photographer who happened to do portraits.
Okay.
So I didn't market the portraits as much. It was definitely all weddings.
Yeah.
Most of my effort was put into the weddings. And then the portraits were more like word of mouth, or, you know, of clients.
Yeah.
Or families that attended the wedding, for example. But afterwards, I put more intention on actually building a portrait business. Like, there was no portrait business before. It just, I happen to do portraits. Yeah. But now portraits is like, you know, in and of itself, like, has its own systems and processes and own marketing plan, and
And when you say portrait for you, like, that's baby, maternity. You do a bit of branding as well. Is
I
that
do
part
branding.
of the portrait, or is that separate?
that's separate.
Okay.
So my bread and butter is babies under 1.
Okay.
Like baby's first year. So maternity, newborn, 100 day, 6 month, 1 year. That's like because one baby gets me 4 or 5 sessions, right? After that, then they usually move to just annual portraits, which is fine. You know, that's why I do my mini sessions, and those are good. But I also do branding, so I help people like update their website. So I offer like the web design service too. I don't market that, but a lot of times, because I used to build websites.
Oh, really?
And then
what have you not done?
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you do?
I used to sell clothes, and I used to make websites.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times clients will come to me needing new branding shots. That's how they approach me, right? So then I'll do a consultation with them, finding out what the new brand message is. Sometimes they actually need consultation on solidifying what their brand is. So we'll come up with what their brand voice is. Then I'll ask, like, okay, let's see how it's going to fit into your website. And I look at the website, I'm like, oh. So then they're like, can you update it as well? I'm like, yes, I can update it as well. So then so I've done like Wix pages, Squarespace, WordPress. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, it's not what I'm trying to do, so I don't market it.
Right.
Yeah. But I can do it. And so, you know, for the right price, yes, I'll do all inclusive for them. And it's nice when they do, because then it's like intentional, you know, we're redoing the whole brand, and they get a whole new site with new assets on there too, and photo and video.
Do you feel like, just because, like you were saying, like, because you were doing a lot of destination weddings and then you sort of like stuck around, do you feel like that sort of like sticking around phase got to know more people like locally, in terms of like, that got you more jobs? And
so I did a whole talk on this too.
Oh, yeah?
About like planting your roots, you know, establishing roots. So when I was doing the destination wedding stuff, like, I had no roots because I was being flown all over the place, which is fine.
Yeah.
But when I wanted to start doing portraits, I really needed to establish roots in that in whatever area it wants to be, right? Because that's where you need to start growing your network. I don't really care to market my portraits to someone in New York, for example, because the chances of them being repeat clients is, I mean, I have a repeat client from Singapore, by the way, who comes every year for sessions. Yeah. So not to say that it's not valuable, but majority of clients, of portrait clients, will be local.
Yeah, I think that's what I realized during the because I used to do only like whole destination, and you know, Vegas being a destination place as well.
Yeah.
All the weddings that I was in locally were even destination couples. So like I had like no local clients,
Yeah.
and during the pandemic, I had no one to to work with.
Yeah.
So that's especially when the border shut down, like it was like there was nothing I could do. Yeah, so that's when I realized that okay, maybe I should do a little bit more baby stuff, and that's what I made you. So I started sort of doing this sort of like baby first year as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, that's been So I've actually completed my very first baby first year like about 2 months ago.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So
I
yeah.
really love watching your growth since we first met, by the way.
Oh, thank you. No, I mean like you helped me so much. Like I think you always say the right thing at the right time. Like in my sort of journey, like because like so I mean WPP I've been going to, but I haven't really attended any of the seminars, but I got to go to the first one because you were doing those like a draw. I think you picked out like 5 people who subscribed to the newsletter, and I was one of them. So I got to attend Caroline's speech, and
Yeah, he got a free ride.
yeah, that was amazing, and because it was during the pandemic, there weren't that many people either, so it was good time.
Yeah, and we got to do like a small group mentoring session. It was just like probably 10 people. It was one round table.
Yeah.
How do you remember all these? I mean, you probably meet so many people from so many people. Like I mean, I remember it because it's only me. You know? But no, that's when she told me like, yeah, if you want to scale up from there, you need to hire people. But I told her like, but that's going to cost me money, and that's not going to be making like because I still have to teach my system to those people, and that's going to take time, and that means that I need to spend more time away from the families, or like I already have a lot going on as a work. Like I don't want to spend more time and money doing something else. But she was like, yeah, but that's what you would have to do eventually. So you might as well start. And that was right. I mean, like there was nothing that I could like argue about, or nothing that I could like say no to that. So I did. So I took on. I actually took on 2 people and started. Obviously, they're not with me anymore, but that was a good experience in terms of teaching them and creating the business manual and all that.
And that manual that I told you to create, the beauty of that is it doesn't matter if they leave.
Yeah.
You just hand that manual to the next person.
Right.
So anytime somebody leaves, I have them update the manual for me. Yeah. Because software changes, right? Or you might even switch companies completely sometimes. So I just have them like go through it again, and can you just update it to the most current thing that you're doing?
Yeah.
So they kind of handle like the training for the next person, really.
Well, they know best what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, they know better than I do,
Yeah.
to be honest, at that point, right? Like I created the system initially, but it's gone through so many iterations now, and I'm not the one with my sleeves rolled up. But occasionally I do revisit it when things, if I start to see things are, the other thing that I teach people to do is have a scorecard. And so it's just kind of keeping track of data of like certain key deliverables, like measurables of how you measure success for your company. And so when I notice that the data is becoming inconsistent, then it's like, oh, what's happening there? The other thing we do at every team meeting is we report interruptions. And so interruptions are just anything that breaks you from your normal workflow. It could be as anything dramatic as customer complaints to shipping to the wrong place or forgetting to do something, or right? And then we look at like, oh, what caused that interruption, and how do we prevent it? So if I'm starting to see a lot of interruptions happening, for example, post-production, right? If stuff are starting to not look like how they normally look, that's an interruption, right? So maybe one complaint we look, it might just be, a particular client, then something, an isolated case. But if it's starting to happen a little more often, it's like, okay, let's revisit this. What's going on? Then I might have to go in and like, is something wrong with the preset? Is there an update that we forgot to do? Or is the editor something wrong with the monitor? Yeah.
I guess so. Like in terms of whether it's one person or with a team, do you think systemizing your business will probably be the best way to sort of like have
Absolutely.
the work-life
Even
balance?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Because even like if you think about being a business owner, the number of decision making you have to do in a day, you know, those it gets exhausting.
Mm.
So then by the time your kids come home from school and they ask like, "What's for dinner?" Like, I do not have capacity to think anymore, right?
Yeah.
So as a business owner, we really want to minimize the number of decision makings we have to do in a day and automate it as much as possible. So when you create that manual, even if it's not for an assistant, it might be for you. Because sometimes, let's say, especially for people, I think this is especially important for people who don't have as much volume, because you might not be making albums as frequently, for example, right? Like majority of my clients get albums. So as a company, we make albums very frequently. But let's say we only sell one album every 3 months. When that 3 months come around again, you don't want to have to like start from scratch again. Like, how do we do this again? How do we use this
It's all
program?
learning, all new learning every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Everything, right? So if you already have an instruction manual and you could just like mindlessly go through the actions, then it will just prevent you from brain fatigue.
So obviously, when you were a destination wedding photographer, that was kind of like your main business. Since then, I think you've grown into many businesses. You have a lot of Instagram accounts. So now, how do you balance all of that?
I don't do it alone.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So what I do, anytime I have a project, like I have a right-hand person. So I hire someone to help really manage that part. But again, I have to build it first, right? I build it to how I want it to be. I build it to how I want that Instagram account. So the Caroline Tran account, I do run myself.
Okay.
The other ones I have, and my personal, obviously, I run myself. But the other two, Caroline Tran Weddings and Carol T Studio, I have someone helping me with that. We do it together.
Yeah.
You know, so I give them for the month, I tell them what are the message that I want, what are the sessions I want them to highlight, but they do the nitty gritty stuff. Like even right now, like the sessions from our, from the shoot that we just did, like I have someone working on carousels for me right now. And like, she's just like, as I was walking in, she's like texting me drafts. Can I do it? I could do it.
Yeah.
You know, but just that brain power of like, which one should I pair up and which, right? Like, it's fun. I like it, but it's only fun for so long. You know, like there's other things that I could be doing, like sitting here with you guys.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she's, working on my carousel for me. So when we're done with this, I'm going to have 4 finished carousels.
Nice.
Yeah.
And something I noticed when I started doing that as well is that because, when you shoot, you have intention behind that single shot or something like that. So even though image may not look as amazing, but because you have that intention and thought process in it, you want to include it in the carousel. But when someone else does it for you,
Right.
that thought process kind of goes away.
Right.
So like it seems like it becomes very interesting what they pick out. And
Sometimes I'll be honest. Sometimes I'll look like sometimes she nails it on the right on the head, and you're like, yes. And there's sometimes where I'm like, really? Those are the best shots. And I'll call her on it. Like, so it's a bad thing when I don't even give feedback. Because normally what I do is I write back with like circles and X's or arrows, like swap these 2 pictures. But when it's so off, I don't even mark it up at that point. Because I'm like, just start over. Like the storytelling is off on this. And but then I'll have to explain. I'm like, these were actually my favorite images. And because maybe she didn't get that story.
Right.
So then I'll have to tell her which ones are the anchor images. Like, can you work around these favorites instead? So it becomes a little more work in those situations, but it's not always like that.
no, I found it quite funny as well. Like because at the end of the day, like people, the audience there's an audience who's going to see those photos. So sometimes not having my sort of thought process in it and then picking out the photos that they like will. In some way that works better, I guess.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And you pick and choose your battles, right?
Yeah.
Like some things like you really like, is really important, and some of them it's good enough.
Yeah.
Like I think sometimes as artists we have to let go of masterpiece syndrome, and we just have to acknowledge like this is good enough. and don't overproduce it. Yeah. Nice.
So
Well,
Nice.
I'm glad you guys are doing this, and I'm honored to be part of it.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be doing another episode with Caroline. And thank you for being with us for the first episode.
My pleasure.
Actually, for the first one, do you want to put in any of your social media handling for, especially the bootcamp? I think will help out
Yeah.
a lot of
I
people.
mean, we talked a lot about business in this one and
Yeah.
balance. And so if anyone wants to check out, it's a free business boot camp that I offer. It's pre-recorded. And so they can sign up on the link right here. The link right here. The link right here. But yeah, it's a free business boot camp that will help get you, kickstart to taking your business to that next level. And I always say that you only know what you know. Like what you know got you to where you are now.
yeah.
And to get to that next level, you actually need to do something that you are not even aware of right now.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've never been there before.
Yeah.
And so just like how you were saying that I keep saying the right things when you need to hear it, is because I'm a couple steps ahead of you. So what I'm telling you is the growth looks like this. It's not like this, right? Because like this, you could see where the end is. It's like this. You don't see what's above that next plateau or wall, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm telling you what's up here, then you're like, oh, like, so that's what I'm, need to do to get there, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I like doing that for people. I like, reaching down and helping them up. And just the same, I also encourage all of you to do the same, right? Like surround yourself with people who are a couple levels above you, but also help out people who are a couple levels below you. And that way, as a community, we can keep pulling each other up.
Who were the ones that helped you get up?
There's different people throughout
Yeah.
the career, but for the last 10 years now, they've never been photographers.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like,
Interesting.
it's CEOs
Yeah.
of companies, because I'm trying to scale. And again, I think photography wise, like there's not many photographers at this point who can really give me something I don't know. And not to sound cocky, you know what I mean? But it's really like, I need to see even beyond that. So it's for the last few years, it's been CEOs, because what I'm trying to scale to is like something I can't wrap my head or couldn't wrap my head around, and I needed several steps up. Yeah. So I have a mentor as well. I'm going to go fly out to Vegas actually to see him the day I land. Now that I say this, I fly back. I get home at midnight. I have a shoot at 3 p.m. and then I fly.
Oh my gosh.
I fly out right away to see him.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I'm going to do a whole mentoring session for myself.
Okay. So I'm gonna see you in Vegas.
Yeah.
All right.
Unless you'll still be here.
Well, when Caroline pointed here and there, anyone who's listening, you will be able to see it on the description.
Yeah.
But well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Aloha.
Aloha. Is it aloha goodbye as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Yeah. It's peace. It's love. It's
There you go. All right. Well,
it's like
thank you,
annyeong.
guys. Bye.
Yeah.